Hey everyone, it's Andrew from the Coaster101 podcast, and I want to talk to you about our podcast sponsor, Zencastr. Since we created the Coaster101 podcast all the way back in 2020, we've utilized Zencastr for most of our recordings. Mainly because the Coaster101 team is so spread out, it makes it so easy for us to record a high quality, at least in audio, that is, podcast. We're able to record studio quality sound, and if we were ever to go with video, we could record in 4K. With Zencastr, our audio is always backed up, even if our connection is a little unstable. Zencastr is an all-in-one podcast platform that's perfect for any podcast, hobbyists like us included. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and anywhere else you can get your podcast. Don't believe me? Try it yourself. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use code Coaster101 and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all our podcasting and contact needs, and it's time for you to share your story. That's zencastr.com/pricing and enter code Coaster101 for 30% off your first month. Thanks to Zencastr for making our recording process so easy, and here's this week's episode. You are listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I am very pleased. We've got a return guest this week, all the way back in 2021, the early episodes of the podcast, which I listened to last night, and it's wild. But we had an author who was on his 6th edition of his guidebook, The Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando. And now in 2024, we are on edition number 9. But please welcome back to the Coaster101 podcast, author Seth Kubersky. Seth, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. It has been way too long since we talked.
It really has. And, listening to that episode kind of in preparation for our talk today, first of all, the podcast, I think, sounds different. I think over time, it's one of those things I've become more comfortable sitting in front of a laptop, as most people have in this COVID and Zoom world we're in.
Sure.
But we spent a lot of time talking about, jumped into the book discussion a little bit, and then it's like, hey, how do you feel about standing 6 feet apart from people in line? And
it was a whole different world in early 2021. And if you've got that 2021 edition of the Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando, hold on to it. It's a collector's item because that was the year that I got to add a whole chapter about COVID and all sorts of COVID information throughout the book. And a year later, that was all ripped out. And now here in Florida, I think legally we're supposed to pretend that COVID doesn't exist. So move along.
Your book in Florida is not banned yet, right?
Not as far as it's still available through Amazon, at least.
Okay, good to know. I love it. Well, let's dive right into this book. It is a book that I have. I'm looking at my bookshelf in my office right now. I'm seeing at least 3 copies, and then I've got the one on my desk.
It's like Pokemon. You got to collect them all.
That's right. And the book does change. I think you said last time it was, maybe a 20%.
That's a rough estimate. Is every year, about 20% of the text gets changed or updated in some way. And coming up in next year, it's going to be even more with a whole new park to open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to go back to you. How did you get your start writing these guidebooks?
Sure. Well, I came down. I did not start out planning to be a writer, much less a theme park guidebook author. I have a degree in theater from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. I was always a big theme park fan, mostly Disney more than Universal back in the 80s. And when I moved down here straight out of college, hoping to get a job in entertainment at Disney, one thing after another, I actually ended up working for entertainment at Universal for several years instead, and did everything from work on the Ghostbusters show when it closed to help open Islands of Adventure. And after a few years of that, I then made a complete career change to IT and created databases for the local government here in Orange County. because it paid a heck of a lot better than pushing a button in a booth in the theme park. But I always stayed connected to the parks and, had my annual passes. And in the early 2000s, when blogs were just starting to take off, one of the big ones that I discovered and kind of fell in love with for theme park information was Jim Hill's. Jim Hill had these great stories about where theme park attractions came from and what theme park attractions might be coming in the future. And, even if some of the stories didn't really have an ending or some of the predictions didn't come true, I was on there all the time. And when they opened the Mission Space ride at Epcot, I was one of the first people. I just, was hanging out, waiting for soft openings. I was one of the first people when they were testing it on guests before the grand opening, and wrote a very long blog post on Jim Hill's website, like a guest post about the ride. And that kind of like was the start of my writing career. Started just writing stuff for free on the internet, and someone noticed it and asked me to work on a guidebook. And eventually I got invited as media to the grand opening of the original Wizarding World of Harry Potter over at Islands of Adventure, and ran into Bob Selinger there, who is the founder of the Unofficial Guides, the original author of the Disney book going back to the 80s. And we hit it off. We had sushi, and pretty soon I found myself writing for the guidebooks.
I think that's the dream. I feel like I'm 10 years into the writing for free on the internet, and maybe one day.
Honestly, it was a full 10 years to go from writing for free to making almost as much money as I made way back at the beginning of my career as a day job. I accepted that writing about theme parks is never going to pay me what computer programming could or something else. But I'm also, I get to work from home or work from a theme park. I don't have to sit in a cubicle, and I get to do what I love. So that's a trade-off worth making.
I love it. And, I know the Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando, it kind of started, before it had its own standalone guide. It was a chapter in the Disney book.
Yeah. So the Walt Disney World book, we call it the Big Book. The Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World has been around since I was a kid. And I can remember pulling that out of the library and planning imaginary trips to Walt Disney World that my family couldn't afford to take. And so, it's always been, from the opening of Universal back in the early 90s, there was always a chapter about it. And that expanded when Islands of Adventure was added and City Walk. And eventually, when it got to the point where Diagon Alley opened, we realized that there was enough attention, there was enough consumer knowledge and interest in Universal that it deserved its own book. And honestly, like the Walt Disney World book is a doorstop. It is huge. I think around the time we split it off, it was over 600 pages. And so just in terms of having something that you can carry around with you without hurting your back, it was kind of necessary to spin it off. And actually, we've always maintained a small chapter about Universal in the Walt Disney World book for people who just want a little information, don't necessarily need the whole Universal book. But it's gotten so big now with Epic Universe coming, we've decided that for 2025, if you want Universal, you're going to have to go to the Universal book because we just don't have room to cover all that in the Walt Disney World book and cover the Walt Disney World stuff.
Yeah, and that's a 10th. That'll be the 10th anniversary of the Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando.
Yeah,
so perfect time to kind of.
I hadn't done the math, but it kind of blows my mind.
I was counting on my fingers before we start recording. But you talk about the Walt Disney World book being kind of a doorstop at 600 pages. I'm holding the Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando. You're clocked in at just under 400 pages.
Yep. Yep.
So you're getting there, and again with a whole new theme park coming next year.
We're gonna be pushing it. I'm gonna have to. We try to be as comprehensive in there without exhausting people. So I'm actually right now going through the book with a fine tooth comb and just finding things that can be condensed or trimmed or just tightened up a little. Without changing the meaning or taking out any vital information. As a writer, you like all those little phrases and things that add color and stuff. But that's when you're in the print book business, you're paying by the page. So in order to get that new Epic Universe information, which is coming in, I got to find some of my darlings. Some of my children are going to have to be sacrificed.
Oh no! Save
so save the old edition. Save the early edition.
Save the early editions, but also save those Derek Bergen cartoons inside the book.
Yeah, I love Derek's contributions. Derek, still writes the for touring plans, the Saturday Six, and every year I beg him to take one or two of them and kind of adapt them to include in the book because they are so great.
Yes. But you mentioned how comprehensive this book is, and I was, again, doing some reading before we started. You have not just, like, hotel reviews and attraction reviews and what to expect. You have things that kind of, most people, when planning a Universal Orlando vacation, aren't necessarily thinking of. You have, church services. You have local hospitals. You have grocery stores.
Yeah.
All these things that people can find. The research that goes into this book... It's got to be insane.
I spend a lot of hours on the phone, on the web, and driving around the Universal area to these little locations on the fringes of Universal. It's a lot of legwork, but it's worth it because the idea is that this is kind of a resource. It's a guidebook. I don't necessarily expect that everyone is going to, before they go on their vacation, read it cover to cover. It's just too much. But the idea is glance through it so that you know the information that you're looking for and you sort of know the layout. Throw it in your suitcase when you're on vacation. And then if something happens, if you're on vacation and someone in your party gets sick or breaks a tooth, or you need to get some food delivered that you can't find in the parks, or you want to buy a bottle of wine and you don't want to spend like $30 on a Behringer, you can just flip open the book and see, all right, that's where I can go and get that taken care of and get on with the rest of my trip.
I love it. And the another thing that I think that the Unofficial Guide really does well is it's not just, I know it's your name's on the book. You've got an entire team of researchers.
Oh, it takes a village. Absolutely.
Yes. But in addition to you, the Unofficial Guides team, the touring plans team, all these people, you have actual guest feedback and comments throughout the book about everything.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of my job is we have in the book a place where folks can take a survey and also email us comments. And folks get really into the surveys. Like you can go granular and give your opinion on every ride, every show, every restaurant that you ate at. And then they also have space to write. And people, I love people writing in. Obviously I love it when they say your guide made my vacation so much better and I couldn't have done it without you. But I also like when they write in to complain about things, either, things about Disney or I'm sorry, usually they're complaining about Disney because it's but for Universal, sometimes they're complaining about things at Universal that they don't do as well at Disney. And sometimes they're complaining about things in the book. And I like that too, because with any book this big and any group of people, so many people contributing and working on it, as hard as we try, we get something wrong. It's inevitable. We're human, and things change there so quickly that even if I was to make sure that every single thing in that book was 100% absolutely correct, tomorrow something would be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I love getting feedback from our readers. And, when we get it right and when we get it wrong, if we like the way that they say it, we slap it in the book. We put it in big blue italics, because I think we're the only guidebook that I know of that includes negative feedback from readers. Usually you just say, oh, everyone loves us. And but when we have an opinion on a ride and then it's subjective. Some people love certain experiences, some people hate certain experiences. So when our ride reviews or our restaurant reviews, we say where we're coming from and what we think. But if someone has a strong opinion that's opposite and they express it well, we'll include it in the book right there and say, you know what, some folks feel like this. And that's okay. That's one of my favorite things, is getting that feedback and kind of challenging some of my assumptions about, just because I love a particular attraction doesn't mean everyone is going to.
Right. And this may be proprietary, but when these surveys, come out, how many opinions are you getting? And presumably it's people from all over the world and thousands.
I can. Well, you know what? I literally just got a dump out of the server today, because I'm going through and checking all of our updated survey numbers, and I am looking, scrolling through and seeing, at a minimum, some of the really. I'm looking at surveys that we've gotten in the last 18 months. And over the last 18 months, a really unpopular attraction might have 1,000 or so surveys. Some of the popular attractions have 5, 7. Not topping out a little under 10,000 surveys. But it's a pretty substantial number. Usually over 1,000 people every year to 18 months. So enough so that our statisticians can, run a interval of confidence. And we also break our surveys down by age groups. Mm-hmm. So when you complete one of these surveys, you might have loved it, but your 4-year-old hated it. We capture all that information. So we get a pretty statistically significant sample. And we also track it over time. So we're able to see, if a restaurant was doing really well and then kind of has crashed. One that we've seen that over the last year has been Fast Food Boulevard. Used to be one of our top-rated counter service restaurants in Universal Studios Florida, and I still like a lot of the dishes. I still like the calamari and the chicken and waffles, but surveys don't lie, and people's opinions have been steadily decreasing on that over the last year. So maybe the kitchen needs to tighten things up a little.
Maybe a little bit. I was there last February, and that was my first trip in years. And I know, when we talked back in 2021, I hadn't experienced Jimmy Fallon. I hadn't experienced.
We could have a whole conversation.
We really could, but there's so much that is changing, obviously.
Yeah,
and I will say I had the chicken and waffles. I enjoyed it, but I'm also just like a glutton for like goofy food sometimes.
Sure.
It's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
But in 2021, when we recorded, the world had not yet been really introduced to the VelociCoaster. And for years, I mean, obviously, Islands of Adventure had Hulk, it had Dueling Dragons, now Hagrid's, it had the Flying Unicorn, but Universal wasn't really classified as a coaster, a place where coaster enthusiasts would go to get like their coaster fix. How do you think VelociCoaster, bringing kind of this world-class experience, has changed Islands of Adventure in the last couple of years?
Oh, yeah. Well, certainly before Hagrid's opened, Universal Studios Florida was the park to go to, because it had Diagon Alley, it had Transformers. A lot of the newer attractions had been going into the studios. Islands Adventure was kind of at low point, and then you had the kind of 1-2 punch of Hagrid's just before COVID hit, and then VelociCoaster being kind of the first e-ticket opening up in Orlando after COVID, reopenings. And I think that it kind of brought attention to the park, not just for the theme park or the Universal enthusiasts, but the more general amusement park and roller coaster enthusiasts. I watch a lot of, YouTube vloggers and stuff, and people who do things like the top 25 roller coasters in the world and stuff. And you didn't see Dueling Dragons or Dragon Challenge showing up on those kind of lists. And even Hagrid's, I think that it's a great story coaster. It's a great themed coaster. But in terms of pure adrenaline, it's not going to match up to some of the ones. But you see VelociCoaster for the last couple of years popping up in the top 10, top 5 on a lot of these lists that are not. They're not doing Expedition Everest or Space Mountain or Tron or anything on that. It's the VelociCoaster is the one, themed attraction that's showing up on those lists. And I think that's gotten people's attention. And I think that if what's the line from Django Unchained? Like, if VelociCoaster got their interest, then Epic Universe will get their attention.
Yes. That's a great segue into what's being built down. I think Sand Lake Road or Universal Boulevard or whatever that road is, kind of down there, a little bit away from the main resort.
Yeah, it's straight down the Kirkman Road, which is kind of the eastern border of Universal's current property. If you just go straight south on that, and they are extending the road so that you'll be able to do it through the old Lockheed Martin property, and you will end up smack dab in Epic Universe, which is right up against the convention center. And this was our convention center, like the number 2 or number 3 in the country. We get a lot of conventions, and that alone, that convention traffic, the hotels down there, it will make that a huge new center of gravity for the Orlando tourism market down on that south end of iDrive.
Yes, and there's a brief section, because again, we're allegedly a year-ish, let's call it 18 months from now, to the proposed grand opening.
Sure.
And we still don't have any official details. I know.
Well, I would hold on. By the time this podcast publishes, we might have some more announcements. I expect that over the next couple weeks, definitely by the end of January, we're going to see maybe some new concept art, some officially announced lands. I think that if you have been paying attention to Orlando Park Stops, Alicia Stella, you probably know everything that they're going to be announcing in the next few weeks. But I think the general public is going to start becoming aware of this real soon.
Yes, and I was going to touch on. Alicia's got some, what are they called in the book? Stella Says.
Yes, I'm so glad that I was able to recruit her into coming on board. I really hope that next year her contribution will be even bigger, because I can't think of anyone better to help write a guidebook to Epic Universe before Epic Universe actually opens than her. I don't know if there's anyone outside of the design team who knows more about what's going into that park. And even I know there are people on the design team who only know what they're working on. They don't know what other people are working on. So
yeah, she I will go ahead and throw a plug her way. Orlando Park Stop, Alicia Stella. Yeah. She is killing it with all things Epic Universe. And if you take what she's got and you take the Twitter feed of BioReconstruct,
oh yes,
you've got a very, very, very cohesive look into what is going into that park, even as it's being built and growing day by day. And I mean, I feel like in 2021 we were talking, it was like one palm tree and they had cleared a land, and that was, and now we've got 4 or 5 just whole roller coasters. We've got Super Nintendo. There will be a Harry Potter edition over there, the classic monsters, How to Train Your Dragon, all these things that are, some of them obviously we're familiar with Harry Potter in the U.S. parks, and we're,
Mhm.
if people get over to the West Coast, we're familiar with the Nintendo Land or have gotten over to Japan. But these are going to be some really, by all accounts, just super immersive experiences coming to the new Epic universe.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the detail of theming that's already starting to go in. Because if you think they've got 18 months to go, if it's got this much detail and just hugeness now, with another year and a half of work, what it's going to look like, I think I think obviously the Super Nintendo world, I think that's going to be the big hit with the general public. I think, they've done surveys that like Mario is even more recognizable character than Mickey Mouse at this point. And, coming off the heels of the movie, that's going to be just a massive draw. And we are going to be getting the biggest, most complete version of Super Nintendo World anywhere. The one in California is fantastic, but it's tiny.
Yeah.
And the one in Japan is just now adding their Donkey Kong coaster, which we're going to have from day one. But the part that I'm really excited for is I think the dark horse, so to speak, the classic monsters land, the Dark Universe, which is based around Dracula and Frankenstein, and is going to have a next kind of a next level Kuka Robo Arm dark ride in it. That's the one that I'm really excited for, because I've always wanted that something, not necessarily a permanent Halloween Horror Nights like they were building in Las Vegas, but a permanent tribute to the classic monsters.
Yep. And I mean, Horror Makeup Show does that to an extent, but this
Mm-hmm.
again, as everything going into Epic Universe is next level based on
Yeah.
and I'm trying to stay informed,
Mm-hmm.
but remain as spoiler free as possible.
It's tough. It's
It
tough.
is so tough. So tough.
I really I feel like Forbidden Journey was probably the last major theme park ride that I walked into, rode for the first time without knowing anything about what was going to happen inside, other than a vague idea that it was a Kuka Robo Arm. Theme park journalism has gotten so good that I feel like we know everything that's going to happen on a ride before we get on it for a first time, and I would love to be able to have that that joy of discovery the first time, but unfortunately it's my job to have to know what's going on before I get to see it in person.
Yeah. I don't know how I did it.
Mm.
I stayed clear of POVs of both Hagrid and VelociCoaster.
Oh, wow.
And that's one of my proudest moments as a blogger, podcaster, coaster enthusiast. I refused to watch POV videos, even the official stuff that came from the parks. I was like, I need to experience this firsthand.
Well, for Hagrid's, that was a tough one because they did not do soft openings. Like, we just were waiting for soft openings that didn't happen. And I didn't, get to see a POV or anything because I was there on opening day. And only had to wait about 7.5 hours in the rain. But I had, looked at the site maps and the construction documents and kind of knew the whole ride layout and everything that was going to happen ahead of time. So it would be nice someday to go on something and be completely spoiled. But
one day it will happen. Somebody will build something in a box, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, you know what? My mystery ride right now is the new Peter Pan attraction that is going into Tokyo Disney. I know pretty much everything about all the other attractions that are going into that Fantasy Springs, but I have no clue what's going on with that Peter Pan ride.
I love it. I want to talk a little bit kind of about it's maybe book related, but it's also kind of theme park journalist related.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Alicia Stella earlier. She analyzes permits and has all of the information.
Mm-hmm.
When you're writing a book like this, do you have sources on the inside who can like help point out things to you, or maybe a little bit more loose-lipped than they should be? I mean, I don't.
I am very careful that I never put anything in the book that could get anyone in any trouble.
Of course.
I have personal relationships with lots of people who work either directly for companies or contract for companies, and we chat whatever, but I try to kind of keep a firewall, like a mental firewall, between stuff that I know personally and stuff that professionally is appropriate. And so anything that goes in the book, I try to at least find multiple sources, or find that it's already floating out there somewhere else, so it couldn't be in any way traced back to anyone. And the majority, unless we're talking about something like Epic Universe, where we're writing a preview of something that's not yet open, if it is writing about something that exists, then it is primarily based on just first person experience. The key is that, yes, I get some inside information, I know some people, but the book is primarily for and about the average guest.
Yes.
And so if it's not something that something that's just going on backstage and is private, and someone doesn't need to know, is not necessarily something that's going to go into the book. But things that you as a paying customer would observe or experience or could do, that's what the book really focuses on.
Got it. I want to talk a little bit about Universal Orlando's newest attraction. That's actually the cover art on this book, is Despicable Me Minion Blast. That was not open during my most recent visit last year.
Sure.
I want your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can read it. We can read it in the book. I want to know kind of your thoughts on the I'm going to call it a walking Omni mover.
Yeah. Here, the too long didn't read is that I think I call it a 3.5-star attraction in the book. I like it. It's grown on me because as an annual pass holder, if you set up the app, you keep track of your score, you get the collectibles. There's a certain kind of slot machine reward kind of feel to that gives it a little bit of replayability and longevity that I appreciate. But when I compare it to Men in Black on the other side of the park, which is 20 years older, much more primitive technology, but just feels like a full experience, feels like a full, attraction, a full ride. Whereas Minion Blast kind of feels like a tech demo that I would do at IAAPA. IAAPA is this big amusement park convention that's it's a cool idea, but it doesn't feel to me like it was designed by people who play many video games. And by that, I say, if you're the average person who's only ever doing it once, you're just going to kind of be overwhelmed by the sheer chaos of all of these blinking lights and moving images, and it's really hard to track where your interactivity is, which gun is yours, which targeting thing is yours. There's so many explosions and things going on at the screen. And then I think I compare it in the book to a video game boss battle that you can never win, because it's just this because you're not in an individual ride vehicle that can sit in front of a scene, let you experience a scene and then move on. You're on literally the moving walkway like they have that never works, going from the parking garage to City Walk. So you're standing on a moving walkway going past everything is a steady pace, which means that everything has to be just this constant loop that never progresses, never gets anywhere. And like I said, I jump on it if it's a 15-minute wait or so. It's kind of a people eater, which helps. But we are consistently seeing guests wait longer for Minion Mayhem, the simulator that's right across the street that's been there for 15 years. People are still more interested in that than they are in Minion Blast.
Yeah, and I mean, arguably, it's been there longer than 15 years because it was Jimmy Neutron before that.
Yes, and Hanna-Barbera. Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that one's a little long in the tooth, but it still seems to be more of a draw. I don't know if they got the investment on the return for Minion Blast. I think that they bought a technology, but they didn't necessarily buy a story or an experience. And I will say I was very, very harshly critical when it first opened because um, there was so much lag. It just stuttered. The frame rate would drop like you were trying to play a AAA game on a Nintendo Switch, and they have somewhat improved that. The lag is not perfect, but it is better. Um, Again, it's the kind of thing that if you're a one-time player, you're just going to kind of be like, well, that happened, and walk out and move on to the next ride.
Got it. Okay. And then another thing that is kind of previewed in the book a little bit, should be opening later this year, is the new DreamWorks land. And if you want to
DreamWorks is coming, yeah.
You want to talk long in the tooth. I don't think adults today understand who Fievel was.
The poor immigrant mouse. He was one of Steven Spielberg's big hits back in the 80s. And he did not turn out to be evergreen at all, that's for sure. No. But Shrek seems to have staying power. Shrek's been around now, since the late 90s, right? Mm-hmm. So he seems to be here for good. He's getting a nice big his kind of tree stump house in the swamp, you can see, is all being sculpted right now, right outside of the entrance to E.T. And you can also see that they have repainted the old Woody Woodpecker kiddie coaster. It's bright colors. And it looks like it's going to be the Troller coaster with the trolls.
Which is the greatest
greatest name ever.
It is so good. I love it so much. But that's going to open at Universal Studios Florida later this year. I want to talk a little bit more about your vacation planning, and obviously you're an annual pass holder. You're in the park several times a week for research or for other purposes.
Sure.
Do you ever visit Universal specifically, but any theme park, with just the goal of relaxation in mind, or is it always go, go, go?
I would love to. It would be so nice, wouldn't it? I even this past year I took a couple of trips. I went out to Abu Dhabi to experience SeaWorld and Warner Brother World and Ferrari out there, and also went to Hong Kong Disneyland for the first time. And I'm a bit of a theme park commando, especially if I'm in a place that I know I'm not going to get back to anytime soon. And I'm rope dropping and I'm hustling around. And I would love the closest I get to it is I make several annual trips to Disneyland to work on Unofficial Guide to Disneyland, and I've got every time I have several days that are very tightly mapped out with a very full agenda. But I always try to make sure I have 1 or 2 days where I can just relax and enjoy the park, especially Disneyland Park. Which I think is my favorite park for just doing nothing in. But yeah, it's hard. Try once a year or so to at least get a staycation. Like around my birthday, I got a night in the Sapphire Falls at Universal to update our review of the hotel, but also just to hang out by the pool. And, have some food and not rush around the theme parks for a day. I always recommend, if you're doing a theme park vacation, the best thing you can do is plan on a day without a theme park, or at least a half day, so that you enjoy the hotel pool, sleep in, go have some drinks without, worrying about having to rope drop, take some time and relax. Because I know I don't follow my own advice well enough.
Okay. Well, we did a little, I feel like this or that, but I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Okay. So for your money, and sometimes this is, for your money.
All right.
If you could stay at any of Universal Orlando's resorts, would it still, and I think you said Portofino Bay last time, would it still be Portofino Bay?
You know what? I'm going to say no. I still love Portofino Bay. But it needs a refurb. It's actually in the midst of a rolling refurb for the next year or so. It needs a refresh. It's still got a lot of great things about it, but right now I would be torn between Royal Pacific, which I really really love for the atmosphere, the vibe. I like the rooms. And I would be torn between that and the Hard Rock. Hard Rock's a little noisy for me, but you can't beat that location. It's
Right.
like you can't get any closer to the parks. So I'd be torn between those two. But I am looking forward to the Helios Grand opening up at Epic in a year and a half. That might be my new top pick if I can afford it.
Have you heard any details about the Helios Grand that you're at liberty
Um,
to discuss on this
I mean,
podcast?
just the same ones that everyone knows, which is it's located basically at the rear of the Celestial Gardens, which is the central area of the park. We'll have direct access into the park. There's still a lot of questions that everyone wants to know, like, will it get free express passes? And that I don't know, but I do know that it will. It'll probably be the most expensive hotel on property, and I think that they will do their best to make it live up to that price.
Okay. All right. And then if you're rope dropping at studios, not
Rope
islands
dropping,
of yes,
rope dropping studios.
if you're
Okay.
rope dropping studios, where are you headed first?
Um, Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, not because I like it, just to get it out of the way.
Okay. Are you a secret song guy on Rip Ride and Rocket, or do you just kind of?
I am. 130 is The Who, Won't Get Fooled Again, or which one is the Muppets?
900 something.
900 something. Yeah, 930 or something. Yes, one of the two. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
All right, and then
Especially with the new track, I understand them wanting to simplify because the multiple buttons did confuse people, but the choices of the songs and how they edited their songs. Black Parade is a brilliant song, and they picked the absolute worst part of the song to try to sync up with a roller coaster. So, yeah, not a great choice.
and I want to say, I mean, I know Comcast has the entire Universal Music
Exactly.
library.
They've got a few songs to pick from.
But that's okay. And then I think I know my answer here, and I think it's in the book. But
I'll see if I can remember it.
If you're over at Islands of Adventure, where are you rope dropping?
I think you got to do Hagrid. If you're an early entry and you're at the front of the queue, you got to do Hagrid's. But if you are not in like those first 100 or so people of the day, then just save Hagrid's for like. It tends to drop around 11:30 noon. There tends to be a lull in the line. So if I wasn't at the front of the queue for Hagrid's, I would do VelociCoaster first.
Okay. If you had to have a quick service lunch, and I was reading the reviews of the quick service restaurants, there was the common theme I was seeing was there's no A value. Like
they're really
But if you had to have one at either park,
I would say right now in the studios, my two picks for counter service would be Today Cafe or Minion Cafe. They both have some really good options. Minion Cafe's service can be a little hit or miss. Most of the time, the mobile ordering seems to work really well for me, but then every once in a while, something gets screwed up and I sit there forever and don't have my food. So, but I think both of those are really good choices over there. And in Islands of Adventure, my top pick is still Thunder Falls Cafe, Thunder Falls over in Jurassic Park. Okay. They brought the ribs back within the last year or so, which I was very happy about.
Yeah, I think when I was there. What's the restaurant in the Discovery Center? Is that the Burger? That's not Burger Digs, is it?
Oh yes, that is Burger Digs, and I really hope you didn't eat there.
I had a really good burger.
It's okay. All right. Good for you.
avocado and pork belly and
Oh yeah, okay. You got the Costa Rica burger that's got
yes.
the pork. See, I have an issue with Universal a couple years ago went crazy for pork belly and add pork belly to a lot of menus. And the problem with pork belly is if whoever is in the kitchen does not know how to treat it right, instead of being all juicy and unctuous, it turns into like leather. And I've had way too much leathery pork belly at Universal to order it again.
Okay. All right. And let me think here. Do you have a favorite holiday at Universal?
Oh, I mean, I got to jump to Halloween. I Halloween Horror Nights for me isn't the same experience as it was 10 years ago. When I could afford a the frequent fear, top line frequent fear pass. Those have gotten way too expensive now. So instead of going 2 or 3 nights a week and hanging out with my friends in a big pack, now I just make one visit during the year. But I go to a lot of Halloween events all across the country, and whatever issues I have with overcrowding at Universal and the conga lines and operations, there's nothing like the work they put into the scenic work, the special effects. No one does Halloween like Universal Studios Florida.
I love it. And I've got one final question before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
I can see this on the video, but nobody else can. So this is
Okay.
this is a question for me.
All
We're
right.
sitting what looks to be in an office. You've got, I
Yeah,
believe,
I'm in my little home office. Yeah.
you've got something from the Williams of Hollywood prop shop behind you, which appears to be a height checker.
Yes, that was I greatly miss the Williams of Hollywood prop shop. I love the new tribute store that they've put in there, but I collected several items, park used items from there. So this over here, I am not actually sure what attraction it came off of because it was not labeled with it. But it's something with like a 36-inch height, I believe. So it's a retired height checker from the parks. And my other favorite piece that I got from Williams of Hollywood Prop Shop is I got one of the doors from the queue of Twister. They when you walked through Aunt Meg's house and everything was all destroyed and there were like wrecked doors hanging at odd angles. I have one of those doors in my house.
I love it. And I know, they sold the cows. They sold a little bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Cows were a little out of my price range, but I could afford a door.
That's the way it goes. But I got to give you your one last plug for the Unofficial Guide to Universal Orlando 2024. Available everywhere books are sold.
Yes.
And ebooks are sold and all that.
Yeah, you can find it in bookstores and Amazon.com, but if you want to get shipped direct from us, you can go to theunofficialguides.com.
Perfect. And to follow you and the Unofficial Guides on social media, wherever that may be these days.
We are on pretty much all the social platforms at the Unofficial Guides. And I am at S. Kubersky. And before I go, I did want to give one last shout out to entertainment folks over at Universal. Had a hard week. They all worked really hard entertaining guests for the holiday season, and now a lot of shows are either have ended this last week, are ending in the next day or two, or going to be ending in the next couple of weeks. So folks like the citizens of Port of Entry, shout out to the mayor, the Sing It show in the studios, Mel's Drive-In and Dance is going to be coming to an end in the near future. There's a lot of new stuff coming with Epic Universe. We talk all about the rides that are coming to Epic Universe, but there's a whole world of live entertainment and atmosphere that's coming there that's really exciting. But there are folks who are going to be out of work while they're waiting for auditions and waiting for rehearsals to start. And it's a really tough time. So I just want to give a shout out to all of those folks who work so hard in entertainment at Universal and all the other parks.
Yes. Yeah. Live entertainment to me, it's a backbone that a lot of people don't necessarily think of.
Yeah.
So, you know, my heart breaks for those people, but hopefully their next big break is not too far off.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. This was really great getting to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Seth. And after you're done following Seth and the Unofficial Guides on social media, make sure you're following Coaster101. We are at Coaster101 everywhere you can consume the platform. We also have a website if you prefer more of a long form written word. And maybe, again, if somebody reads these articles that I've been writing for 10 years, maybe I get discovered. Who knows?
It could happen.
I love it. And make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, giving 5-star ratings on Apple Podcast and Spotify, because the more people who find out about this show, the bigger the audience gets, which is more attractive to guests like Seth when they want to come on and talk, you know, all things theme parks, roller coasters, and their guidebooks.
I will come on anytime. Anytime.
That's a is that a promise?
Or a threat.
We might need to have this discussion about Jimmy Fallon that we talked about earlier.
That could be a bonus episode.
When we get a Patreon, you're going to be the first person I call.
It's a deal.
Awesome. And a final thank you to JMMD Entertainment for our theme music. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. We will talk to you soon. See ya.